Welcome to episode number 6 of Weight Loss Awakening. This is Dr. Karp, and today we are going to be talking about fat. And we're going to go through the 9 rules of fat. And by the end of this particular class, this episode, you're going to understand everything you need to know to make the right decisions about fat in your diet. Now, the first rule of fat is that fat actually helps you absorb the nutrients that are in plants. So when you're eating a salad, it's important that you have some kind of fat, whether that's sprinkling some raw nuts on your salad or having a little bit of olive oil, something. You need a little bit of fat in order to absorb the nutrients. The second rule of fat is that it doesn't affect your blood sugar. And why this isn't important as a rule is because both carbohydrates and protein affect your blood sugar. A lot of us are not actually aware of the fact that protein can actually lead you to converting the protein into sugar. And the way that happens is through a process in your body called gluconeogenesis. Generally speaking, we don't need a lot of animal protein. And because of that, when we exceed our levels of protein, what happens with that protein is that it gets converted into sugar. So the reason this is important is very simple. Because protein can affect your blood sugar, carbohydrates can affect your blood sugar, but fat does not. And therefore that keeps our blood sugar steady so that we're not getting those spikes which cause us to have hunger cravings and then to be led down a path that we don't want to go when it comes to deciding for yourself what you want. We want to be in command and in control, and when our bodies are not cooperating because our blood sugar is up and down, that makes everything a little bit more difficult. And we need to be attentive to the fact, be aware of the fact that when you have too much protein, and if you haven't watched the last episode, please do. If you have too much protein, that actually gets converted into sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis. So the second rule of fat to review is that you don't have to worry about blood sugar, and therefore, in the scheme of things, taking into account all the other rules that we're about to discuss, fat is not a bad addition to your diet if it's chosen properly, correctly, purely, and that's what we'll get into in the remaining rules of fat. The next rule is fat provides a feeling of fullness, satisfaction, and flavor to your food. And when you have a food that is completely devoid of fat, it often suffers from some flavor deficits. And the truth is that we are embarking on a path of every day sort of becoming better in terms of the decisions that we make. And if we are eating food that is not satisfying, then it's just not going to work. We need to have satisfying food, and fat is a critical part of that. So let's talk about plant fat first. Plant fat, the first rule of plant fat is that it's fragile outside its packaging. And what I mean by that is its original packaging is like a nut. So if we take almonds, the fat in that almond is going to be very, very protected by the fiber and all the other ingredients that are in the nut. When we take the almond oil out of the almond, when we take the fat out of the almond and isolate it as almond oil, that means that we're taking it outside of its protected packaging, and that lets it be a lot more unstable. So if you watched the episode on olive oil, you'll know that light, heat, and air are going to cause that almond oil, or the olive oil, or the walnut oil, or the avocado oil, whatever the plant oil is, when it's been extracted from its original packaging, air and light are basically going, and heat are going to make this thing become unstable. And when it becomes unstable, it can go rancid. And when it goes rancid, that's another way of saying that it's been oxidized. So instead of all your antioxidants going to counteracting the effects of aging and all the other insults we go through in a normal day of being out in the environment, they are all, instead of going to that, going to reverse all of this oxidation caused by ingesting this oxidized oil. So if you want to know more about that in terms of how to choose your olive oil or to choose your fat, plant fat, go to watch the video on olive oil. The next rule of plant fat, and any fat really, is that it's 120 calories per tablespoon, which means that it's very easy to pour a lot of oil on a salad and add an enormous number of calories. Now, as I said, it's important to have fat in your diet, but when we're not getting the feedback from the plant itself, in other words, if you wanted to get the same amount of fat in 1 tablespoon of almond oil, let's say, how many almonds would you have to eat? Probably like 15 to 20 almonds you would need to eat to get the same amount of calories that you're getting in 1 tablespoon of the oil. And we need to really pay attention to that, because if you ate 15 almonds, that's a good amount of almonds. You're going to feel full. Take a tablespoon of almond oil or olive oil or coconut oil, and you're not going to feel full, but you've just gotten the same amount of calories. And so we do need to pay attention to oil sources of calories and be aware of the fact that they are 120 tablespoons no matter what the fat is, and we need to pay attention to that. So for my patients that are on my disease reversal diets and weight loss diets, I recommend no more than 3 tablespoons of any oil per day, and that could be olive oil or whatever oil it is, as long as it's a pure oil. You can use it. Just pay attention to the caloric density, but don't be afraid of almonds. Don't be afraid of avocados. Don't be afraid of nuts, because they provide some feedback. You eat it and you feel full, and therefore that causes you to eat less. Pay attention to it, of course. Don't just, obviously just keep on eating nuts all day. That's not going to be good, or almonds or avocados. You need to pay attention to it, but not as much as you would have to pay attention to oil, which is just so concentrated in calories, and also very difficult to ensure that it is pure. Again, watch my episode on olive oil so that you can understand a little bit more about that. The next rule of plant fat is that you should have a minimum of 1 handful of nuts per day. And the reason is because nuts have been shown to stabilize insulin levels and stabilize blood sugar levels, and this will prevent that fluctuation in your blood sugar. And it's a filling snack. It's great for you, and we don't have to worry as much about the calories. Again, I said a minimum of 1 handful of nuts per day. If you're on a weight loss plan, pay attention to the calories in this case, but you're better off having a handful of nuts than a handful of grapes or a handful of some other carbohydrate. It's much better for you to get high quality sources of whole plant food, whole plant fats, wrapped in their original packaging, a little bit of avocado. The other advantage of getting these raw handful of nuts per day, is that it provides essential fatty acids in your diet. And these essential fatty acids are used for so many processes around your body. It helps with keeping your skin moisturized, because the fats that are essential fatty acids are what make up the natural oil barrier of your skin. Okay, let's move on to animal fats. Now, the first rule of animal fat is that the animal fat concentrates the toxins in the animal's body. So if you remember what we spoke about in the last episode, where we talked about if you're going to be eating animals, and it's okay to eat a certain amount of animal products, then make sure you're choosing the highest quality animals that you can possibly find. And how do you do that? You do that by making sure that they're grass-fed or pasture-raised, treated humanely, not fed antibiotics. You really need to do your research. And so if you're eating just your run-of-the-mill, store-bought animal, chicken, beef, eggs, whatever the case may be, just realize that the fat that you're eating from there is going to be loaded with all kinds of toxins. And again, it just is to point out the fact that you're going to be getting these into your body, so please choose the best and most high quality sources that you possibly can. The next rule of animal fat is actually that the animal fat, when it's taken out, like in other words, having lard or chicken fat or beef tallow, is actually more stable than the plant oils are when they're taken away. And the reason is that there's a higher percentage of saturated fats. And if you're going to use them, they are okay to use a little bit. Again, using the same rule, no more than 3 tablespoons of any sort of purified reduced fat. Pick the highest quality. If you're doing super high temperature cooking, or you're making, say, a traditional cultural dish that you learned from your grandparents or great-grandparents, use the fat that they used. In my culture, it was chicken fat that we would use. And on very rare occasions, obviously we'll make a very traditional dish, and it just tastes better with chicken fat. And you shouldn't be afraid of that. Using it all the time, I'm not so sure that's a great idea. But again, stick to the 3 tablespoons a day rule. If you are cooking some traditional dish and you want to do sort of a deep fry, of course, I'm not recommending that ever be a part of your regular diet. But if you're doing something at a super high temperature cooking, some of these fats are a lot more stable. They are not damaged as much with high heat that some of the vegetable oils are. And they have their role in this particular case. So this is the episode about fat, and I wanted to review a couple different things that sometimes I get questions about when I talk about this. In the news or in popular diet books, there is this concept of having a certain ratio of protein to fat to carbohydrates. And while I truly believe that your animal protein for almost everyone needs to be reduced to a lower amount. We're talking 20 to 30 grams only per day. If you haven't seen the last video, please watch it. I don't feel like there's any magic ratio of carbohydrate and fat. I've seen people who've eaten 35% fat, 80%, I've had patients with 80% fat, and either ratio can be healthy if you pay attention to all the things we discussed. High quality, making sure it doesn't go rancid, watching your purified oil intake, keeping to high quality sources, handful of nuts per day, focusing on whole plant sources of fat as the preferable fat source. If you focus on these if you focus on these rules and you become aware of these particular issues, it allows you to choose these fats appropriately, and you don't have to worry if your ratios are going a little bit higher one day or lower the next. It's not something that you need to concern yourself, because we have enough data in the scientific literature to know that trying to calculate some magic ratio of fat, protein, and carbs hasn't really been shown to do much of anything. What is relatively consistent is low animal protein, which we're getting all kinds of information scientifically now about why that is beneficial, reducing that. So I hope this video was clear, readily understandable, and actionable. We're seeing all kinds of success stories over in the Facebook group. So please, the link will, if you're watching this on YouTube, the link to the Facebook group will be below. Feel free to leave your comments below, your suggestions on any kinds of subjects that you would like me to cover, that you feel that you're confused about. I'll be happy to provide a video for you. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback, which gives me the energy to make these videos. So I look forward to our next episode. So until next time, my name is Dr. Karp, and this is Weight Loss Awakening. Thanks for watching.